So Java exception handling. Exception handling in Java is the one of the most important feature. So and it is a basically a requirement of whenever we are writing a program or a project, we come to a lot of situation where we need to handle the situation in the code that occurs while execution or compilation. So Java exception is basically a problem that arises during execution of program. Okay, so the reason could be of that those exception, like it could be invalid data that user is being passed, or the source of data may be not correct. That could be the case. Or it could be like if I'm trying to do some activity like opening a file or something, and that file is not present in the system, and if I try to do some communication from one network to another network and there is some network issue, or it could be like some unexpected error. So these are the situation where exception happens while execution of program. So this is this is called basically exception while execution of program that we need to handle. Why we need to handle? We want a program should run and in the expected way. If any error is, if there is any possibility of any exception, that can be visualized, or if it is not, and if it is not caught at the time of compilation or runtime, then we need to see what can be done for that kind of exception. So bottom line is that whenever our program executes, there could be possibility of error or exception that needs to be handled. Okay, so in Java we have something Java exception hierarchy. Exception hierarchy means what is the top level of exception, what are the other bottom level of exceptions. So if you see here, that is on top we have throwable. Throwable is the class which is on top. Okay, and on top of throwable, of course, there is object, because object is the super class of any class. So throwable is the top exception class. So that is extended by exception and error. So error is the separate category that happens when we have some issue with Java virtual machine, some crashing kind of things. That is the error. Other side we have exception. So we can handle the exception and we can handle the errors also, but we should not handle the error. We can handle only exception. So in the exception also there is two type of exception, like runtime exception or compile time exception. Runtime exception we call unchecked exception. Compile time exception we say as checked exception. What is compile time exception? The exception which occurs when you write the program and compile it. Those exception which is being caught at the time of compilation, that is compile time exception, or say checked exception. The exception which are not caught at compile time. Okay, those kind of, and that exception occurs at while execution of program, that is called unchecked exception or runtime exception. So if you see here, exception is being extended by say interrupted exception, runtime exception. So runtime exception is a separate category. Other than runtime exception, whatever classes those are extending exception class, those are checked exception. So runtime is the set of exceptions that is coming as a runtime exception. So super class of all those runtime exception is runtime exception. So runtime exception has like say arithmetic exception, null pointer exception. Those are runtime exception. Say file not found. Okay, and few other exception, that is checked exception. Then on the error side, we have some say that thread death. So some thread is crashing, or some problem with Java virtual machine while execution of program. Those kind of error is basically comes those kind of error that come in the category of error. So error generally we don't handle. Exception, in the case of exception, we have to handle checked exception. We have no choice. We cannot ignore the checked exception. Runtime exception or error can be ignored at the time of compilation. Whenever you write the code, runtime exception and error can be ignored. Okay, generally we not catch runtime exception. We catch only checked exception. Okay, so exception method. So in the exception class we have a lot of methods. Some methods are extended from the throwable, some methods are written in the exception class itself. Okay, and catching the exception, whenever we find that there is an exception, we need to catch it. Okay, either we can catch it, either we can throw back to the caller. Suppose there is one method which has some exception, which while execution of that method there is some exception. So either that method can handle the exception in that method itself, or it can throw it back to the caller method. Okay, the method which is calling this method, it can throw the exception to that method. Okay, so this is exception hierarchy. So type of exception, as I said, runtime exception, those exceptions that can thrown during the normal operation of Java virtual machine. So that is runtime exception. It is not caught on the compile time. So at the time of writing the code, at the time of compilation, we can ignore runtime exception. So compile time exception while compilation of the code. An error doesn't come at the time of compilation, it may come at the time of execution. Okay, so exceptions, all the exception whatever we get, we need to handle or throw the exception. That's option we have. Either we handle it, when I say handle, we have to catch it, and then we can write some message, or we can again throw some exception. That way we can catch the exception and handle it. Or if we are not handling, it can be thrown out. So while handling the exception, we will have the keywords like try, catch, and finally. These are the keywords which we use to handle the exception. Throw and throws are those keywords that is used for handling the exception. I will tell you in detail. Multiple catch block. Suppose you are having some while execution of program, you have some exception, and you can write multiple blocks to catch it. Okay, custom exception. Not necessary we will always work on the exception what Java provides. We can create our own exception. So whenever we create the exception, we extend the exception class, or we can extend the throwable also. Okay, nested try catch block. Nested try catch block is required when you are trying to do multiples hierarchy level of execution. So suppose top level, you have some top level code, then you have some nested code, and we have again nested code. So if innermost is throwing some exception, it can throw to the outside, and again the code which is outside, that code can catch the exception, or it can throw back to the caller one. So this is a nested exception also. So when in case of nested exception, we have to use nested try catch block. What is the rule while doing the exception handling? A method can detect and throw a runtime exception when it's encountered an error in the virtual machine run at the time of running the program at runtime. So normally the method you write should throw the exception, not a runtime exception. So runtime exception is generally not caught. So we generally catch the checked exception. Then we will take a look on null pointer exception, NPE. Null pointer exception are that exception which occurs when we are trying to access some methods or variables. When we try to access some methods or variable on the reference which is null. Okay, so let's try to see exception in the working way. Let's open Eclipse. Let's open exception class. So exception class is basically available in java.lang package. So if you see here exception class, it is extending throwable. So throwable is again a class, okay, which has a lot of methods, okay, which has some constructors, some message, get cause, okay, print stack. These are methods are available in the throwable class. Okay, so in exception class we have only constructors. Okay, so it is calling all the methods to handle the exception that is already available in the throwable class. So throwable class is the parent class of all the exception. Okay, so let's see what are the classes that extends exception. So on top if you see, that is object, then throwable, then exception. So in exception, okay, let's see first who extends throwable. Throwable is being extended by error and exception. Okay, mainly error and exception. So in error we have error like configuration error, and a lot of errors are there. Okay, let's not go through error, let's try to understand the exceptions. So in exception we have all the exception, all are checked exception till this runtime exception. So we have runtime exception. Other than runtime exception, all are checked exception. So in runtime exception, we have a lot of exception. So like arithmetic exception, array store exception, buffer overflow exception. Okay, then we have something called a lot of exception, index out of bound exception. Then there could be null pointer exception is the runtime exception. So a lot of runtime exceptions are there. So these exception can occur whenever execution of program happens during around the area where this kind of around the functionality where this kind of exception can occur. So suppose any execution of program, it is doing some kind of activities, and those kind of activities can throw some runtime exception. So these exceptions, runtime exceptions, are designed like that. it will be helpful to catch them and handle them. So other than this runtime exception, everything is checked exception in the exception class. Okay, so if you see exception here, it has only constructors, so it is accessing all the methods available in the throwable class. Okay, so let's try to create one class. So in package basic, I am creating one class, say test exception. Oh, it seems already there. Let's remove it. I might have created for some purpose. So let's create the class in basics. So test exception is the class where we will try to play with exception and exception handlings. Okay, let's try to make one logic which will create some problem. Let's create one method. Public static void test file. Okay, let's write one main method. Here let's try to do input stream. Okay, so here I am creating one input stream reader. So input stream reader is basically okay, so we need to basically create the file input stream. So I'm creating one file input stream. So that's a new file input stream. I'm passing the file. File I will tell you later what is the how we will do the IO operations related to files. So at this time let's try to understand only exception part. Okay, so what is happening here, I am trying to open a file to read it. Okay, so file input stream is required when you are trying to read a file. So when you are trying to read a file, I need to provide the name of file. So if you see here, there could be possibility that this file whatever I'm trying to read, that may not be available in the system. Okay, so it will say that unhandled exception type file not found. So file not found is the checked exception. Okay, file not found is the checked exception. So this exception we need to handle it, we cannot ignore, because you will not able to compile the program. How do we, so we need to handle. So now question is coming, how to handle the exception in Java. So to handle the exception, we use try, catch, and finally. Okay, so these are the three keywords which is being used to handle the exception. Try is the block, we write the code where possibility of exception is there. Okay, so if I say here string s is equal to new string, say some value, okay, then there is no possibility of error here at the time of compilation. So it's not necessary to put in the try block. So try block, we will put that code where we have possibility of getting the error or getting the exception. So in this we will write this code into try block. Okay, now if you see compilation problem is gone, it means that we are going to handle it. So if there is any problem happens on this area, we are catching it. So to catch the exception, we will put the catch keyword, and in parenthesis we'll put the exception, whatever possibility, whatever exception it can throw, I will throw it, I will catch it here. So right now I am catching that exception, file not found exception. Okay, so I can catch the exception which is occurring from this line or block which I have written in the try block. Okay, or I can catch any super class of that exception. So file not found I can catch, or I can catch, we know that this is checked exception and which is extending the exception, I can catch exception. And in fact we know that catch is extending the throwable, I can catch throwable also. So it is same thing. Okay, but to advise here, we need to catch those possible exception which are occurring here. So here the exception that is occurring, that is file not found. Okay, if I try to catch some other exception, say I am accessing null pointer exception, then that is not solving my problem. Generally we don't catch runtime exception. Runtime exception, null pointer exception is a runtime exception, but even if we catch it, we can catch it and we can take the necessary action if we want. Generally we don't catch the runtime exception. So in this example, it is not, my problem is not at resolve, so it is still throwing the file not found exception. So we need to catch either that exception or some super class of that exception which is occurring here. So this is the catching. So whatever I am doing inside the catch block means I am going to write the logic to handle it, so it will not create any problem now. So in that I am handling here, saying that sysout saying that file not found, and we can access the methods on this exception class. So here if you see, most of them is all the methods are from throwable, which can be accessed through exception, the object of the exception, file not found exception. So here I will say get message. Okay, so what are the general methods we try to access? So if I go here throwable, okay, generally the message what we try to use, that is get message, get stack trace, print stack trace. Print stack trace is the method which is very often used. So print stack trace will give a full stack trace of the exception, from where exception has been started and what is the actual root cause. That can be traced using print stack trace. Sometime we give get message, sometime we give get message, it will give one liner message. Okay, so that is the string. And print stack trace does not have return type, it is output, so we generally say e dot print stack trace. Okay, so these are the methods which we generally used on the exception class. Going back to program, so I want to, before getting the message, I can print stack trace. Okay, in finally I will talk about finally later, so let's remove finally here. Okay, so it is always required to have try block. Try block can be with catch block, or it can be with finally block. So catch block is always optional if there is finally. Okay, so I can write the finally block here. I can remove catch block here. So remember that combination is always try plus catch, or try plus finally. Okay, or try plus catch plus finally. So these are the three possible combination that you can use it here. So if there is no compile time, there is no checked exception, then catch block is not needed. You have only try and finally. Without try, that is not a valid syntax. So it will always ask you to write some syntax error, insert finally to complete the try statement. Okay, so it is not forcing you to write catch, but it is forcing you to write finally. So I will say finally this one, but my exception is not at caught, so I need to use catch block. So catch in bracket whatever exception occurring, Now my exception is handled. What I can print here, I can print e dot print extract trace, and then when we can say that message file not found, whatever message I can write, I can append some message from extract trace exception also. So I would say e dot get message. Okay, let's try to call this method. I will say test file. Okay, we know that I have not created any file like a.txt in C drive, so let's run it. Okay, so it says that java io file not found exception. Okay, it says that a.c8.txt in C drive system cannot find the file specified, and this is the extract trace. So extract trace will give you, it will help you to locate the problem where it has been started, where it has started. So it is started, initiated from test exception java line number 25. So java line number 25 is, sorry, no, it's not 25. Okay, yeah, it's 25. It is started the main program, from the main program. So in the main program I have written test file, then it goes to test exception java file, and test file is the method. So that is line number, exception says line number 15. So this is the place where problem is occurring. Okay, then it is going to file input stream, where you can see it is trying to open that, and then it will go to native method of input stream open method, and in open method it is giving the problem. So this way you can see the extract trace. This is called extract trace. Extract trace is helpful when you are trying to trace the problem to solve it. Okay, here I can say that system cannot find the file specified. So this is the message which I have written, and this is coming from e dot get message. Okay, so how to handle the exception? We will write the try block. We will write the code, whatever code I want to write, I will write in try block. While doing that, we have to take a look that the code what I am going to write in try block, is there any possibility of throwing the exception or not? If there is any possibility of throwing the exception, then only we will write into that try block. Otherwise we can write outside also. Okay, and remember that whatever variables you are declaring in try block, the scope of that is in the try block. So you can easily find out with the curly braces. So the scope of any variable which is declared inside this try block, the scope is only till the try block only. Even it is not available in the catch block or in finally block or outside also. It is not available. So finally is the section which will always be executed. Okay, It means that if you encounter any exception or don't encounter any exception, the finally block will be executed. Suppose there is no problem in this line. Suppose I create a file. Okay, let's put something in finally block. Sys out. So if you run this, your finally block will be executed. There is an exception. There is an exception in this line which is being caught here and handled here, and after that finally will be called. If I don't provide any catch block, then also finally will be called. If there is no problem in the try block, there is everything goes fine. If everything goes fine also, then also it will go to finally block. Let's try to fix the problem. Let's go to C drive and create one file called what is the file it is looking for? A.txt. So let's create one file a.txt. So if I run this, because there is no exception, this catch block should not be called. So only finally block will be called. So things to remember here is whenever you are writing the finally block will be always executed, even there is exception in your try block or there is no exception in the try block. Okay, and remember these combinations. Catch is optional when there is runtime exception in the try block. Okay, when there is compile time exception, then you need to have the catch block. Okay, then we will see handling multiple exception. What does it mean? It means that if your try block is having multiple type of exception, here there is one type of exception, that is file not found. Let's try to do some other things which can possibly give you another type of exception. When I say class dot for name and give com dot test dot a. Okay, so if you see here, this line having some problem. It says that unhandled exception type class not found exception. Okay, so class not found exception I need to handle. So I will say that add another catch block. So here if I want to handle, I will say something I will say something in catch block. So it will say that class not found. Okay, we know that I don't have anything called a.java. Okay, so if I run this program, I should be seeing that class not found com.test.a. I have not created any class like a.java. That's the reason this is coming in this catch block. Okay, So here what is happening, Java lang dot class not found. So this is also a checked exception. Okay, so let's try to see some more exception. This is handling the multiple exception. Let's talk about ordering of the exception. Okay, before going to explain about ordering of exception, so in case of handling multiple exception, here we are writing multiple catch block, one block, another block here. So in Java 7 there is one facility provided that you can write multiple catch block in a single line. It means that I can write something like class not found exception, then we will say we will put common message, okay, then this catch block is not required. So you have done the catch block, one exception and the exception. Okay, you can write only one catch block having multiple exceptions. Okay, so if whatever problem will be there, it will say that error com.text. Okay, so this is the error. If I say stack trace, I can see the stack trace over here. So stack trace, if you see the detail of stack trace, what it says, code started from here, then it went to here, and this is the place where problem came. Okay, so you can locate the code where you need to do the fix. Okay, so let's try to understand ordering of exception. In which order we have to catch the exception. We have to catch the exception in low to higher order in the hierarchy. In the inheritance hierarchy, child exception should be catched first, then parent exception should be catched later. Okay, so out of, if I remove one exception, it will say that file not found exception been not caught. Okay, so we can catch the exception which is super class of both classes, both exceptions. Okay, so in case of ordering, if there is any other possibility of exception, I can add here next level. So this and this, either those exceptions should be a different exception, they should not have any relationship in the hierarchy. So class file not found and class not found exception should not relate with each other. If they are relating, if you are catching two exception and those are relating, then you have to first catch the child class exception, then parent class exception. So here if I say exception E, so what it says that in this case it says that it is already caught by exception which is super class of all those things, so these are not needed. Okay, so it has to be first child class, then its parent class, then its parent class, if you are using the convention before JDK 1.7. In case of JDK 1.7, you have to remove all those child classes if you are putting its parent class. Okay, so let's put it in multiple catch block. So first one, I am trying to catch file not found exception. Then I will catch class not found exception. Then I will catch exception. Okay, so remember that the effect of this variable is till this block. Okay, that's it. I have the parameter as E that denotes exception. Okay, so hierarchy is first child exception, then parent exception. I cannot say something like this. And here I say file not found exception. This way we cannot say. This will give the again same issue, saying that exception is on that is the superclass of these two classes. So there is no, it is all the exception, all the type of exception is already been caught in the first catch, so other two catch blocks are not needed. So these are very much important interview questions also. What is the hierarchy of catching the exception? So catching the exception should start with child class exception, then it goes to parent class exception. And if we use JDK 1.7, how to represent the catch blocks, those kind of things can be asked in the interviews. What is the use of finally? So finally is always caught, finally is the block which will be always executed. Okay, even there is no exception, or even if there is exception. Okay, so finally will not be executed only if there is exit from the try block. If you are trying to exit from here, so if you run this program before putting exit here, so finally block will be always executed. So let's try to put here return. So if you put return, what does it mean? After doing these two things, it should return from the method. But because we have finally, it will come here and execute the finally block. Finally block will not be executed if I put something like system dot exit say 0. What is happening here? See here, it is not going to finally. Okay, because once this is executed, there is no error here, it is executed successfully, then it will just exit it and it will not go to finally block. If I execute this one, what is happening here? while doing this one, it will go to the exception. Okay, and exception, there is no, after exception it will call the finally, because flow will not come here back, because there is exception here. It will not execute this line. So if I know that in this case we are getting the problem here, that is here, what I will say system.exit, then it should not go to the finally block. After putting this error, it will exit from the program. So when you are using the exit, then finally block will not be called. Okay, so it depends where exactly you are using the system.exit. So if program flows comes on system.exit and this particular statement gets executed, nothing will happen happen after that. So here we have seen that after this exception I have not cached the class not found exception, because I have cached that one in its super class of the exception. Okay, so that's the reason there is no need to cache that exception. Okay, but it is always advisable to cache those exception which is there is possibility of being caught. Okay, so let's try to understand two concepts, throw, two more keywords, throw and throws. Okay, so throw, let's say throw is used inside method. Okay, throws used at method level. Why do we do throw and throws? Throw and throws are required when I don't want to handle the exception inside a method, or when I don't want to handle at the place where exception is actually occurring. Okay, so here this is the place where exception is occurring. If I don't handle the exception which is coming from this line, then possibility is either I have to, so there are two possibilities when there is exception, either I have to catch it there itself, or we have to throw back to the caller. When I say caller here, this is the called method, test file is a called method, and caller is main method. So main method is calling this method, so this method is called method and main method is the caller method. So like that, there will be caller method, there will be called method. So if the called method does not handle the exception that is occurred, then it can throw the exception to the caller. If it is throwing the exception to the caller, it can throw the exception to the caller in two ways. One way is using throw keyword, and another way is using throws keyword. Okay, so throw keyword is used when you catch the exception and throw it back. Okay, and throws is used when you don't catch the exception, thus just throw at method level. So here if I say I have cached the exception in case of class not found exception, then instead of system exit I will say throw new exception. Okay, so it says that when I say throw new exception from here, when I say throw new exception, it says that unhandle exception type exception. So that whatever we are throwing exception, it is not at handled. So who will handle? Caller will handle. So I will say I will throw it. Okay, so throws is used at the method level. So if I am throwing at method level, what I need to do, I have to catch at the caller level. Somewhere it has to be caught, otherwise it will keep on throwing the exception back to the caller. So right now caller is here, main method. So if someone will call test method here, because this method is throwing the exception, because after handling the exception also I am throwing the exception. Okay, so what I need to do, either I can catch it here, or I can throw it back. Okay, I have thrown it back from the main method also. See here, it is exception in thread main. While executing this main method, there is exception which is being thrown. What is the exception? While calling this method, there was exception, that is class not found. It came to catch here and again thrown one exception. So that's the reason caller is going to call it. So this is the way one method will communicate to another method while some method gets fail. Okay, so throwing the exception will be done in two ways, throw and throws. Throws is used at the method level, so like this it will throw the exception, so caller will handle it. Or if caller is not handling, caller will throw the exception. So if in this case caller can handle it, so I am putting that line into try block and catching it here. So there will be two stack trace, one stack trace this one and one stack trace this one. Okay, let's run it and see the output. If you see here, one is test exception test file. Okay, there is another, this is one stack trace and this is another stack trace. Okay, so we have seen how to use the throw and how to use the throws. So generally what we do, if we are throwing the exception, we don't write anything, we just say that throw exception. If I am not throwing, there are two exceptions. One is unhandled file not found exception. I can handle it or I can throw it. I am throwing it when I say throws file not found. Then there is another problem, that is about class not found. I will not catch it, or I can catch it. So right now I am not catching it, I will just throw it. So it is throwing two exceptions. One is file not found and one is class not found. Same here, if I put exception here, I can catch, I can throw all the type of exception. Okay, or I can remove those exception and throw exception only. So you can throw the child exceptions, those are the particular exceptions or its parent exception. Okay, so there is, then we don't need to write any try, catch, finally anything. Okay, if you want, you can, if you want to write some finally, so what you need to do, finally will come with try block, so you can write something in finally. So what it will do, it will try to execute this one, and because there are two exceptions, file not found and class not found, then it will just catch that exception and it will execute finally and throw back to the caller, throw that exception to the caller. So caller's responsibility is either to handle it or it will again throws back to the caller. So now here there is no caller after this main, so it will just print the stack trace in the console. Let's see how to create the custom exception. Custom exception are exception which are generally created when you try to give the name of try to give your name of for the exception. So what happens when you're writing a big project, so there are multiple layering in the project, so service layer, data access layer, so those kind of layers can be written. So if there is any problem in any layer, we generally write an exception for each layer, so that whatever problems happens on a particular layer, we will throw that only exception which is written for a particular layer. Okay, so that's the reason we will use the custom exception. So here we will write, we are using the testing, so we will write some custom exception for this testing. So how do we write it? We will write a simple normal class, so we will say test we will say custom test exception. Okay, this should always extend throwable or exception, or it can extend to anything whatever you want. So generally people write custom exception that can extend exception class, or that can extend throwable, or that can extend runtime exception. Okay, I will take a closer look on runtime exception later. So right now we are discussing only checked exception. So what it says, we will create one constructor. Okay, that is public constructor, and we will say super. Okay, so it will call the super method, that is exception. Here if you want to pass some message, we will call the super s, because we already have message. So this is how you can create your custom class. How we will use it? So if there is any problem, I will throw custom test exception. So if I am throwing custom test exception, see here, it is not this file not found and class not found exceptions are not handled here. So what I will do, I will add catch block for this one and for this one. So I will not print anything. I will simply say throw new custom test exception. Say in custom test exception. Okay, so we will say new, throw new custom exception with some message here also, here also. If I want to give some other message here, let's run it. So what it says, in custom exception it has thrown the exception. So it has thrown the custom exception after catching it. So if you come to main method, in the test it has been caught here, after that it has been thrown. So if it has custom exception has been thrown, so what is happening here, it is catching the exception. So if I don't catch the exception here, so it has to, we need to handle the custom exception. So I will catch the custom exception here. Instead of catching the exception, I will catch the custom exception here. Okay, so here we understood how custom exception works. Okay, so now we will see about how to handle with runtime exception.